Stop me if this sounds familiar. You finally sit down to tackle the big project only to be interrupted by an email, notification, Slack message, or the immediate overwhelming urge to check the news. In today's distraction heavy, high pressure workplace, attention is our most valuable and most endangered resource. We are dealing with the information overload, chronic stress that leads to burnout, and a constant struggle to sustain the deep focus needed for creative and complex problem solving, which is what we are asked to do in corporations. We try every productivity trick on the book, from digital detoxes to endless coffee, but our brains are simply struggling to keep up with the pace of the modern office. What if the key to unlocking peak focus and sustainable productivity wasn't about willpower or time management apps? What if the solution was about literally training your brain to be better at its job? Today, we are stepping inside the Brain Train office to explore a powerful data driven technology that's been proven in the worlds of elite athletes and clinical psychology and is now rapidly moving into the corporate boardroom neurofeedback. In this episode, we are going to discover how this fascinating technology, rooted in the principles of neuroplasticity, is rewiring employee focus, combating workplace burnout, and delivering a measurable return on investment for forward thinking organizations. And I'm thrilled to welcome our guest, Santiago Brand, a leading expert in high performance psychology, QEEG, and applied neuroscience. Santiago consults with high stake groups, helping them move from struggle to success through targeted brain training. Santiago, welcome to the show. And I wanted to understand, where are you based, Santiago?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really thrilled to have this conversation to help spread the word about neurofeedback and brain training. I am currently based in Singapore.
And why in Singapore? Why not in some other places in Europe and the USA? Tell me.
Well, I lived in the USA when I was younger, on and off for 13 years, and that's where I did college. And during the pandemic, my wife applied for a job here. She's a researcher,
Mm.
and she got a job here in 2021, and that's when we moved here. So come January, will be 5 years now in Singapore.
Beautiful. And it's a beautiful place to be. And let's dive a little bit more into the understanding of what is neurofeedback. And especially for those that are unfamiliar, because I can tell you personally, for the familiarity started like 5 years ago. It's not that far away. Could you give us a clear, concise definition of what is neurofeedback?
Yes, I'm glad you're asking the question. The first thing that our audience needs to understand is that it's a non-invasive procedure, meaning we're not bringing any sort of energy or other compound into the brain. We're using brain activity to train it, to have it reflected for individual training. So it's a non-invasive procedure, and it's also a brain training modality, which means we are training brainwave activity to stabilize the brain, to optimize brain performance, to help the brain self-regulate. And that brings about a series of elements. One is performance enhancement. You're doing something, you can do it even better. Two, we mitigate symptoms if you're struggling with your sleep, struggling with your emotions, struggling with your memory. We can mitigate those symptoms or eliminate certain symptoms. And obviously, if you want to do it in a more natural way, not depending on caffeine, not depending on energy drinks, not depending on pills, we can do it too. That means that we can teach the brain to tap into its natural resources to do things more efficiently. If you're not doing something well, if you're struggling with something, we can help you with the struggle. And if you already have an edge and you're competitive, we can make you better at those skills. And what happens is we do a brain map where we understand your brainwave patterns. And why doing that is important because everybody's brain activity is unique. Our brain's wiring is as unique as our DNA or our fingerprints. So in that way, we're unique. There's no two brains that are wired the same way. And that means the pitfalls and the possibilities. When we understand how your brain works, then we can put sensors in different parts of your brain, and we can teach you how to control that brainwave activity. That means we look at the patterns, and if you have little patterns in the areas that help with concentration, we can teach you to teach your brain to make more brainwaves that help you focus more efficiently. If you have brainwaves that make you sluggish and too distracted during the day, we can help you make less of those frequencies, and that you can put your brain in a state in which you can do things better. If you need to focus better, we can help you focus more and get less distracted. If you want to be more daring and brave in your negotiating skills, we can teach your brain to do that too. If you want to cut down performance anxiety, speaking in public, doing a negotiation, we can train your brain to foster those skills. Now, even if it is something clinical, in this case, something which is corporate or performance related, we take you for a moment and we enhance your performance. We can give you that edge over yourself and against your competition.
Hmm. I wanted to understand more. I get the part where the signals or the communication inside of our brain is done through either chemicals or electrical signals between the neurons. That part I get it. And electrical signals produce waves, electromagnetic fields. That part I get it. And then suddenly you are telling me that today with science, we are capable of identifying certain waves that are related to certain emotions, certain triggers inside of our brain. So it is possible to say, I'm stressed just by assessing a certain wavelength, amplitude, or whatever it's called. I forgot all these terms. So it is possible to identify emotions that are produced by these waves. Is that correct?
Yes, certainly. One of the most surprising aspects of a brain map is that when we do a brain map, or when I do a brain map, I never ask the person to tell me anything about themselves because I want their brain to do the talking. That means that as I'm looking at the brain waves going in front of the screen, and I'm looking at the brain wave patterns in front of the screen, I will be able to say things like, it looks to me like you struggle with sitting still in situations that are boring to you, and the client will have a reaction such as a smile, or or they will look at me in surprise and asking me, how can you possibly know that? Or I will tell them, it looks to me like you could sleep better. You wake up in the morning and you need that coffee to get you going. And they will say things like, how can you possibly know that? Well, we can tell a lot about you without knowing you just by looking at your brainwave patterns, which means today we can be quite precise in learning what your skills are, but also what your struggles are and how that relates to you on a day-to-day basis, to yourself, at work, in your relationships with other people. Now, we cannot read your thoughts. That's science fiction. And at some point, it will be science fact. But for now, that's not what we do. That's not what we're all about. But we can discover a lot about your memory and your emotions and how you react under adversity just by looking at your brainwaves. And that is of extreme value because that brings the credibility and the objectivity to this. So this is not magic. This is not a new era, something that is a trend for now. It's something that is being built by science over the last 50 years. It's just that at present time, the technology is much better than it was 10, 20, 50 years ago. And we can get more precise in how we study your brain and how we can train your brain for that purpose.
Sorry, I'm a little bit of a geek. So what you guys are looking at is where is this signal or this wave located in the brain plus the shape of the brain. Is that enough, or do you look at other things that I haven't mentioned?
Well, you're right. What exactly we look at is how your brain is performing, and or your brain is underperforming under certain tests. So when we look at these brain waves, if there is too much of a certain kind, we will see that that potentially is a problem for you. For example, for your sleep or your concentration or your decision making. So the brain speaks in terms of patterns. Once the brain shows a frequency repeatedly where it shouldn't be or when it shouldn't be happening, we can tell that's a potential problem for you. Again, it could be impacting your sleep, your ability to control your impulses, your ability to say things in a more diplomatic way. You know, if you have impulse, emotional eating, all of these things we can tell from that. And then what we analyze is, where is your brain dysregulated? Where does your brain need fine-tuning? Think of when you take your car to the mechanic and they look at the oil, they look at the tire pressure, they look at the brake fluids. That's what we do in your brain. We see, as the miles go, what areas of the brain need that fine-tuning so it continues to work well. And the training that we do with the neurofeedback is the fine-tuning of that brain. That means we keep your brain as young and as useful as possible for as long as we can. And we've discovered that we can do it even in older age. I've trained clients who are 94, 95, 98 years of age, who are relatively healthy, but they have, the usual memory problems that come with aging. And we can recover their memory and train the brain to recover memory, or to get them, to recover memory, to give them more energy. Anything that they want to perform, we can do it better. So a brain that's alive can benefit from this. Essentially, anybody who has a brain could benefit from this, in different degrees, of course.
Does it even work for people who have symptoms of ADHD, like kids with ADHD? I'm close to that situation. That's why I'm asking you, Santiago. Does it work?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, neurofeedback was born out of the need of working with ADHD. The one condition where I say we have the most efficiency, meaning we can be specific and sometimes can be more efficient than medication itself, is ADHD. And as a matter of fact, most of the people who do this clinically, their largest percentage of patients and clients are people who struggle with ADHD in its different varieties. And then from ADHD, it evolved into helping people sleep better. It evolved into helping people reduce and manage their anxiety more efficiently. And now, as you say, it's going into the corporate boardroom where stress is high, the stakes are high, and we train these brains to perform well under pressure. Essentially, when we talk peak performance, meaning corporates or athletes, or the corporate athletes, as we like to call them, is to perform in critical moments during competition. You're sitting there doing a $100 million merger, and you need all the attention you can muster, and you need all the emotional control you can muster. Well, can you train your brain to get to that point? Yes, you can. You are an attorney, and you're in a high-profile trial, and you need to say certain things at a specific time. Can you train your brain for that emotional control? Yes, you can. You are the CEO of a company who needs really good sleep because sleep helps you make better decisions. Can you train your brain to do that? You certainly can. Well, we are more and more reaching more domains that some years ago were just science fiction, literally. And now we can tap into areas of the brain and human performance that we couldn't before. And as the years go by, the beautiful thing about this is that the technology gets better, the way we can train gets better. Just to give you a point of reference, let's do a very specific scenario. We can train with a movie. So what that means is that the person will control what happens with the movie with their brain. They're not using a keyboard. They're not using the remote control. They're not using the mouse. They're not using anything external, just the brain waves. And what that means, let's say I place an electrode right here, and I will teach your brain to make more beta waves, which are good for your concentration, and make less theta waves, which are bad for your distraction. So as I'm putting that, I set the parameters, and I will tell your brain the movie only plays when you make more beta waves and you make less theta waves, which means you're looking at a TV, you have your favorite movie playing, and all of a sudden the screen shrinks and the movie stops. That means your brain got distracted. And that's the signal that your brain needs to know that it needs to focus itself again. Okay. What your brain does is it refocuses and the movie plays again. Every time the movie plays, the brain gets the reward of, or the message that it is doing the correct thing. Every time the movie shrinks and stops, it means I'm getting distracted. I now need to refocus my ability to do it. So when you're doing neurofeedback, the one entity really doing the training is the brain. The brain gets caught up and interested in the signal and will take control. And this is something that is really difficult to understand unless the person is undergoing the experience. But the best way to frame it is the people who do neurofeedback tell me, I function like I'm in automatic pilot, like I'm in autopilot. I'm
Mm.
sitting there and I know what's happening, but I know it's my brain controlling what is happening. When you can achieve that state more and more and more and more, is that when you start transforming your life for the better, for your performance, your relationships, your work, anything you want to accomplish. As long as your brain gets interested in the signal and engaged with the signal, and you can sustain that for 30 plus minutes over the course of a few sessions, that's when you start transforming that. It's the equivalent of going to the gym and doing weightlifting. Your muscle is going to grow inevitably. If you're doing it right, and if you're getting the right nutrition, your muscle is going to grow, you're going to get stronger. We do the same with the brain when we train with neurofeedback.
Mm. So what you're saying is that these few sessions, in fact, because I'm a little bit familiar with the area of habit formation, uh, people says whatever. Some people say 30 days to change a habit. Sometimes it works with 10 days, sometimes it works with 60 days. In principle, for let's say this lack of focus that our brain goes away, to train the brain to get back to the self-control, in fact to the control of our attention, how many sessions or days do we need?
That's a really good question. What I will start saying is most users, most people who train their brain with neurofeedback, on average between the first to 15 sessions, meaning the first 3 to 4 weeks, start noticing a difference. That
Hmm.
difference for some people is greater, for some people is more noticeable, for some people is more subtle. Because every brain has a different composition and every brain learns at a different speed. But what I will say is, on average, between 5 and 15 sessions, the number one thing people say is, I'm sleeping better. 99% of the people that do neurofeedback, even if they're not doing neurofeedback for better sleep, report that sleep is the first behavior that changes for the better. And that they say, I'm falling asleep faster, I'm staying asleep longer, I'm waking up more refreshed. From there, the other changes come along: attention, memory, focus. Now, let's say you have an individual with a relatively healthy brain. ADHD is a common condition.
Hmm.
You can do 20 to 40 sessions, which is 10 to 20 weeks of training to get the results that you have. We've trained people with epilepsy, for example, and that can take up to 500 sessions, 600 sessions, which is maybe 2 or 3 years of training because it's a more severe condition. But if you're looking at performance-related issues, 10 to 20 to 40 sessions is all that you need. It's a few weeks of time of investment in your time and money, and you can see the benefits. So it really pays off if you look at the time component.
Hmm. Santiago, one of the biggest resistance that I have heard about neurofeedback is that there is also a dark side of neurofeedback, and it has been driven by people who are bullshitting about it. Like people who will tell you, I can heal your cancer by controlling your waves. And you want to take them and slap them to death. I have wanted to do that with some people. So there is a little bit of the magic side, or people who are not rooted in science that are going to start telling you stories that are really bad, uh, bad for people. What is your feeling about how can we know that we are talking to someone who knows what it is and what it can do and it cannot do, versus the guy, the Russian, Belarusian guy who will sell you the machine, who will read your thoughts, for instance?
I am very happy you're bringing that to the forefront. I would like to mention some red flags that people can be aware of when it comes to neurofeedback practitioners, because there are a lot of people who are very unethical and irresponsible promoting neurofeedback. The first red flag will be neurofeedback can help you with everything. Okay? Neurofeedback doesn't help with everything.
Mm.
It's a powerful tool, but it doesn't change everything. It doesn't eliminate everything. So if somebody's offering you neurofeedback and you ask them, can this be good for schizophrenia? Can this be good for anxiety? Can this be good for this and that? If they tell you can fix everything, they're not really ethical and responsible. Number two, if they're using words like cure or heal. Neurofeedback is not an intervention that cures or heals anything. It's a brain training modality, and the main objectives of neurofeedback are stabilizing brain functioning, regulating brain functioning, optimizing brain functioning to mitigate symptoms, hopefully eliminate symptoms. And then
Exactly.
for number two, if you run into a practitioner who tells you, I can cure your ADHD with neurofeedback, you need to run away from them because they're probably a ripoff.
Yeah.
Okay, they're fake and they're out after your money, not your best interest in your health. Okay. Number three, people who are doing it took a weekend seminar on neurofeedback and now they call themselves specialists and experts. A true neurofeedback practitioner would be somebody who has gone to school for psychology, mental health counseling, psychiatry, medicine. So it's somebody who will have a college degree and graduate degrees in psychology, clinical psychology, neuropsychology, mental health counseling, social work, nursing, psychiatry, things like this. Because unfortunately, due to the lack of regulation, there are a lot of coaches and people who, with no medical background and no clinical background, buying gizmos and promoting this in a very unethical way. So when you check the BCIA, the Biofeedback Certification International Alliance, it's a website, you can go and there's a listing of certified practitioners who have a background in psychology or medicine or any health science, who have graduate degrees and who have undergone board certification. These are individuals that have done the hard work of doing the learning, getting their licensure, getting certified to make sure that they provide you with neurofeedback in a safe but realistic way. And that's very, very important to understand. Therefore, bcia.org is a website that people need to visit if they are interested in neurofeedback. And you can do a search by zip code or postal code worldwide. If you're in Singapore, you're going to find me and other practitioners. If you're in the United States, you can look by zip code. If you're in Switzerland, if you're in any part of the world, you can look for certified practitioners within a 5, 25, 100-mile radius of your location who are certified. And these individuals will have the proper board certifications, the proper degrees, and therefore that's the people you need to work with. There are people who use very cheap equipment that they can buy on Amazon or other places. There's toys out there that are being promoted as neurofeedback devices that are $300, $400, but they're more like neurogaming. And something that I tell people is, look, if you want to impress your friends instead of playing Twister, take out this gizmo for your kid's bar mitzvah, and then you will be the life of the party. But this is not neurofeedback. This is neurogaming. Neurofeedback equipment is not cheap, and it means certain criteria. They would be FDA registered to begin with, and they are in the upwards of $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 or more. So a good piece of equipment is not cheap, and obviously the education is not cheap. This is not a cheap industry. And those of us who are in it will pay a lot of money for equipment, will pay a lot of money for education, for training, for supervision. And you have to ensure that if you're putting your brain into someone's hands, that they meet specific requirements. And therefore, that's what people need to look for. And I'm so happy you asked that question. I really appreciate that.
And I'm happy that you have answered in a way that is understandable for normal people like me. That's great, Santiago. Now let's jump to the part about the understanding how the brain learns. So I understood that neurofeedback is rooted in neuroplasticity. That means that at any age, our brain has the possibility to learn new things. Inside of the brain, there is neural pathways that are learning. It means that two neurons start connecting and doing something. Okay, let's call it magic because I don't understand the full thing, but it means just connection between certain parts of your brain. Neuroplasticity can happen at any age. That's why people 50 plus like me can still learn new stuff. And also is rooted in the operant conditioning. That means that we create behaviors by repetition. Can you briefly explain how the brain learns through this process to adopt better patterns for focus or calm?
Yeah, that's a very important question too. First off, you're right. Once neurons start communicating, something magical happens. And I think magical, miraculous are the right adjectives to describe this. The
Mm,
brain is a fabulous world. And if you get the neurons to communicate efficiently, I don't think there's any limits to what we can learn and do and achieve. And if everybody took the time to work on their brain health, mankind would be in a much better place than it is now.
mm,
Now, having said that, the other part that you bring about is the operant conditioning, and that's the key element to learning to train your brain to achieve the things that you want to achieve. And the operant conditioning operates under a very simple principle, which is if you like something, you repeat it because it is rewarded.
mm,
If you don't like something, you will extinguish it or you will reduce that behavior because it is punished. So, as an example, speeding. When you speed and you get pulled over by the police, you get a fine, and it's a very expensive fine. The chances that you're going to not speed in the future increase because that behavior is being punished, it's not being rewarded, it's being frowned upon. If you're a good driver, then you keep your license and you can also get off with a warning or get off with some benefits, right? That means that we ensure that the environment is there for the present, for the brain. So when it likes something, the brain will repeat that behavior. When it doesn't like it, it will reduce that behavior. Let's take ADHD because that's a very good example. ADHD is a problem of distraction, but it's not a problem of I'm not paying attention. It's a problem of I don't know what to pay attention to.
mhm,
We have a network in the brain. It's called the salience network. And what that network is in charge of is deciding what is important for us at any given point in time. Let's say, for example, that you and I are having this conversation and there's a loud noise where I am. I will turn around because my salient network says pay attention to it. If I see that it's somebody who fell, then I easily and quickly bring back my attention to the conversation. Okay. But in ADHD, every single stimulus, every single piece of noise is relevant to the brain. The brain fails to compartmentalize and filter out the unimportant information. And that's an important thing. But when we're doing the neurofeedback, again, with the example of the movie, the client is there and they want to enjoy the movie. But they will enjoy the movie only if the brain starts doing what we want it to do. That means when the movie stops, the brain is receiving a punishment, quote unquote punishment. It's not a physical punishment. Nothing is happening to the brain physically. We're not shocking the person with electric shocks or anything. Where the brain just says, I want to watch the movie. So when the
mm,
brain says, I want a movie to play, it will go into a state, work to go into a state where the brain waves facilitate that. And when the brain it gets into the state, the movie plays again. And the brain will say, now I like this. As a consequence of repeating this over time, the brain learns that the behavior that it wants to keep is the one that keeps them focused. And
mm,
it seeks to avoid the distraction, which is the movie stops. Now, this is what we see on the outside. This is what the brain perceives and the patient perceives. But as a consequence of this, we're getting new connections in the brain. We're getting more blood flow into the brain. We're getting the brain to work with better energy. Well, the outward most visible product is the movie plays, the movie stops. But as a consequence of that, you're rewiring the brain in a positive way. You're generating new neurons. You're generating new connectivity that from that point forward will allow the individual to focus without the need of pills or apps or anything else. Those things help. I'm not saying they're not useful, but the individual will rely less on that and more on their own brain capacity. So the neurofeedback fosters neuroplasticity. That means the generation of new neurons. Fosters neuroconnectivity. That means the brain can create new and better networks. it fosters the functioning of the neurotransmitters, your dopamine, your serotonin, your GABA, your neurotransmitters start functioning more efficiently. It optimizes its size. The brain can get grow in size and get more robust with better connections as a consequence of this. So you're watching a movie apparently, and this is a very simple process, but the underlying changes are much more intricate than that, and obviously too complicated to explain in an hour podcast.
Uh, I totally get it. And something just to highlight that I think it is important for people is that it is not when you gave the example of the driver and the speeding ticket. So every individual is different. That means then that a speed ticket for a person like me, I care about the money that I'm spending in useless stuff. Then even a speed ticket of $30, $30, it would be like, oh, I will feel it like painful. But there are some people who are more elastic to this expenditure. So maybe for another person it would be $100. So it is not there are principles that also depend on the individual. This story about the reward and punishment will depend on the individual. And that's why you need a person who knows where to detect where there is a change in terms of behavior. Right, Santiago?
That is absolutely correct. And that's why we do a brain map, and that's why we do neurofeedback. It's an individual and personalized process. We never do a one-size-fits-all approach. It doesn't mean that every client who comes to my center does the same protocol with the same machine and the same intensity. That's not what we do. And that's another red flag for people who are looking for a neurofeedback practitioner. They do everything, they do the same thing with everybody, and they don't do a brain map. If you go to an individual who does neurofeedback, they don't do a brain map on you. How can they possibly know what to train? I always use this analogy. Think of you have abdominal pain. You know, you're sitting one day at home and all of a sudden you get strong abdominal pain. You drive to the hospital, you call an ambulance, you end up in the ER. Well, that abdominal pain could be from parasites, something simple as you need to do parasitic medication. It could be it could be an internal hemorrhage. It could be just gas from something you ate, right? It could be anything. But the point is this: the doctor comes and says, "I'm gonna cut you open to find the source of the pain." You're not gonna let them do it without looking at you first. And any ethical doctor is not gonna cut you open just because you have pain.
Yeah.
So the same principle we need to apply with the neurofeedback. The brain is the organ that causes behaviors and emotions. We need to take a look at it before we work with it. It's the common sense to do, but as we say, sometimes common sense is the less common of the senses.
That's true. What are the common objective metrics that you use to measure the success of a neurofeedback program? Is it possible to quantify things like focus or mental clarity?
Yes, very possible, and I'm happy you're asking that. Number one, we do the brain map. You come today for a brain map. We train you for 20 sessions. At 20 sessions, we do a second brain map, and we see the difference between one brain map and the next. If there are difference, it means the brainwave activity is changing, hopefully for the better. Okay. Number two, we use the data from the sessions. So the sessions will give us statistical data, your frequency for your brainwaves and the amplitude of your brainwaves. And those numbers reflect the function of your brain. And over the course of X number of sessions, we see if those numbers are going up, if we want them to go up, or those numbers want to go down if we want them to go down. Okay, so the more objective data, the more scientific way of looking at it is by looking at your brain map over a period of time, looking at the data from your brainwaves. Number three, what you subjectively experience as the patient. So you will come and say, I cannot sleep to save my life. I have high anxiety. Let's say those are your two priorities. We do a brain map and we start training you. 20 sessions later, you say, I can now go to bed and stay asleep. And after 20 sessions, you will say, my anxiety is down by 30%. Still high, but it's more manageable. I have hope that we can get it lower. Or you will say, oh, in this last 2 weeks, my anxiety is down by 50%. Again, as you pointed out, it changes from person to person. And then the fourth element is the people around you. To give you a good example, I work with corporates frequently, and sometimes corporates will come on a Monday after the weekend for a session, and they will say, the most interesting thing happened to me over the weekend. I was at a corporate barbecue, and my coworkers started telling me that I look happier. They're amazed because I'm smiling more. They say that I look more peaceful, that I'm more outgoing, and they want to know what I'm doing. So when people around you start noticing the differences, that's also a subjective measure of change. And therefore, what we do is we combine the objective metrics, which are the brain map and the data from the sessions, with the subjective metrics, which are what am I experiencing of myself as the client, as the patient, and what people around me, my wife, my husband, my children, my friends, my coworkers are noticing. Normally, there's an overlap between them. Obviously, the subjective will have some biases because as human, we're biased, but normally there's a positive overlap. Meaning if we see a reflected change in the objective data, the subjective data will match that. And the person will have the info that they need to reassure that there's a change happening.
This is good because, as you said, it's not enough about the subjectivity because sometimes we either bias or we are nudged to believe that we are feeling better because we are paying for that specific program, and we don't really know. I even have discussions with my daughter who is a ADHD person, and she will notice if there is a change. It is very difficult for her to notice if there is a change. I was wondering if there was real data, and as you are pumping this data directly from the brain, you cannot lie it. It's not about I feel, it's happening.
Yeah, and that's a very important point because what I was going to mention next is when we use brain mapping and neurofeedback, we have a very clear and essentially infallible principle that we operate under, and it is people lie, but their brain doesn't.
Yeah.
People can tell you, I'm feeling okay, there's nothing wrong with me, but the brain tells a different story. And what I normally tell my clients is, I beg to differ. This is what your brain is showing. I don't get confrontative with the client, but I will say, look, I'm going to trust your brain data. You're coming here for help. Let's trust your brain. People lie, the brain doesn't. And that helps bring the objectivity. Now, again, the most beautiful aspect is people are very impressed. You can tell a lot about themselves. People tell me, you're describing me, you're describing my children to the T, and you never met us before. Just by looking at the brainwave activity, it's amazing that you can tell all these things about me or my kid or my husband or my wife. So this is rooted in scientific principles, is evidence-based, is evidence-informed. And like you say, the data, the statistics and the math do not lie. And the brain doesn't lie.
I have another question, but this time it is personal, Santiago. Burnout. Can neurofeedback help people to recover better from burnout? Let me tell you my perspective, and I don't know if it is if it matches any scientific perspective. I have the impression that burnout, you are never totally out of it. You once it has started, your brain will go into certain patterns, and it's very difficult to maintain a healthy. You can, I mean, it will not heal, but you can, by routines, certain habits, make it better. But your brain is already a little bit damaged, and anything, any stressful trigger can bring you back to a state where your brain is frozen in front of the computer and you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Can it help for burnout people to recover better?
Yes, it can. And what's important to clarify here, as with any other thing, is number one, again, neurofeedback doesn't work with everything. And when I say it works, I mean it works in different levels because people are different. Let's say we take a group of 20 corporates from a corporation that hires us to do some neurofeedback for burnout. They say our corporates, our executives, our vice presidents and presidents are burned out. Can you help them? I will say yes, but we need to look at the reality of things. Some of them are going to have better results than others. And that depends on many components. Number one being the brain. Some people's brain is more flexible than others. And what that means is, let's say that out of those 20, 15 got a 70% reduction in their burnout. And the other 5 experienced only a 20% reduction in burnout. Can we say that neurofeedback was unsuccessful? Well, that's open to interpretation, because any reduction in burnout, I think, is a positive reduction in burnout. We always work hard to eliminate the symptoms. We cannot always do that. And that's the reality of things. Just with cancer, some people take treatment for cancer, they survive it. Some people go into remission, it comes back, and they die. And some people, the treatment doesn't do anything for them. So just like any other thing, we work very hard to shift that brain to the positive aspect. Now, what is also very important for people to understand is that any success with neurofeedback is contingent upon your lifestyle. That means that people have sometimes, some individuals come with the wrong impression and think that neurofeedback will shift everything for them and they don't have to do anything outside of that. So they keep drinking alcohol, they keep doing drugs, they can go to bed late. If you don't make any changes there, how can you expect your brain to change and this training to help you? It doesn't work that way. It's very important to understand that if you want to, and let's speak specifically about the burnout, you need to have some quite significant lifestyle changes. The one behavior I'm always advocating for is sleep. I tell everybody worldwide where I go speak, if you only had the option to change one behavior, that should be sleep. Okay, because it's the one behavior that we're harming the most the world over. As you sleep better, rest assured your burnout will get better because the neurofeedback will be more efficient. So obviously there's other lifestyle changes like your nutrition and your exercise and your habits in general terms. So you can increase your chances for improvement and long-term resolution if you take care of yourself. You cannot expect to have changes if you don't stop drinking alcohol, if you don't stop smoking cigarettes, if you don't stop doing drugs, you don't stop going to bed late. That it doesn't work that way. And that's the challenge we face the most with neurofeedback, is that people have a very hard time changing habits because it's really hard. And sometimes people flat out don't want to do it. They want to keep doing the same silly things they do and, and expect a huge resolution. In the case of burnout, can we help? Yes, we can. But that will be heavily dependent upon your motivation, your flexibility, and obviously how well or how not well you take care of yourself.
The message resonates with me quite a lot. But then I put myself in the situation when you are burnout, completely stressed. That's the reason why you cannot sleep. But and it's always the vicious circle. You don't sleep, then your brain is completely fucked up most of the day. And as you said, it cannot be just controlling your brain waves that can help you. It needs to be a big change of lifestyle, and sometimes this big change of lifestyle is to be removed from the toxic environment. Like if you are in a workplace that is not good for you, it might be that it's good for others. God knows. So you remove yourself, and then your sleep becomes better, even if you are working as much, because people think that burnout is just overwork. No, it's when you live the life that you weren't dreaming of that you feel really bad about it, and then the pattern starts, cycles of not sleeping, is over stress, not being present at home, and so on. Thank you, Santiago, for making me think about this important topic for people, for employees. Now, let's suppose that a CEO decides, I want to invest in a program a neurofeedback program, And of course, the first question is going to be, do I have a return on investment, a financial return on investment, not the one that we have happy people. Maybe he doesn't give a shit about that. He wants to know if there is clear returns, maybe primarily driven by reduced costs because there is lower turnover, less absenteeism, less burnout, or maybe sometimes increased revenue because people are focused so they can be more productive, more creative, or better decision making. Is there any study that can show this works, guys?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the first point that I bring into the forefront to the corporate's attention. If there's an HR office or whoever takes the decision in the companies, the first question they ask, am I going to see the return on my investment? And I will say yes. Now, the point is very clear. If you want to increase revenue in your company, you need to invest in the people because the people are what bring the revenue and the financial success to the company. Unless you have a company that only works with machines, then you have to take care of the machines, but the machines don't need doctors and neurofeedback. But if you have a company that relies on people, from the doorman to the CEO, you need to invest in the people. What do I mean by that? Well, in the companies that I've worked with, what we've been able to achieve, first of all, is reduce the number of sick days.
Mhm.
People have sick days because some people have migraines, some of them have anxiety, some of them have depression. It varies. But when people do brain training, they feel better. Let's talk about migraines. This is a very good example because migraine is a very common condition.
Mm.
People take up to 20 sick days a year or more because of their migraines, because when they get a migraine, it can last a few days. And in the companies that we work with, we've been able to reduce this up to 60% or 70%, meaning these individuals go from having a migraine that lasts 3 days to having a migraine every 6 months and it lasts only a day, or they never have migraines again.
Mm.
Well, if you have fewer sick days, you don't have to pay as much insurance. You don't have to cover the cost of the absenteeism. So that way, you're already saving money and making more money. The other one where we can really cut down costs and increase revenue is in accidents,
Mm.
job-related accidents. If you have people working with machinery and they're sleep deprived, you can have somebody cut their finger off, and that's a liability for the company. That's the insurance gets involved, the lawyers gets involved. If you reduce accidents, you're reducing the liability, you're reducing the cost that you spend, and you have a healthier and happier worker. So that's another way in which you can obviously reduce and save. And the revenue comes in people being happy in the sales. But when I work with sales departments, what do we focus on? Sales skills.
Mm.
The good thing about neurofeedback is this. You can work on one thing. Let's say you focus on sales. You can do brain training for sales confidence and sales performance and sales attention, sales, whatever you want to call it. But when you train the brain, you're not working on one thing specifically, even if the focus of the training is that. Everybody who does neurofeedback will see the benefits in their sleep, in their self-esteem, in their energy, in their physical and mental health, even if you're not directly working with that. Because the brain doesn't compartmentalize things. Once you're working on the brain extends the result of the training to every single area of the person's life. So
Mm.
you work with somebody who has migraines. You reduce the migraines, you eliminate the migraines. Now they're every day at the office. They're working more efficiently. They're making fewer mistakes, and they're making more sense. So yes, it's a win-win from the human perspective, and it's a win-win from the financial perspective. It's just that they're connected. You cannot have the revenue without the people, and you cannot have the people without the revenue. So as a consequence, if people are happier at work, if they find their purpose, if they feel healthier, if they feel happier, the company is obviously going to reduce the overhead and they're going to make more money down the road.
Mm. I don't know enough about the model of how neurofeedback in corporations work, but I'm just trying to give you the perspective of someone who doesn't know anything about it and extrapolates what I know. I know that, for instance, when you send coaches to a corporation, so you have the cost of the coach itself. They don't have to be psychologists, they don't have to be graduates. So for me, maybe sometimes the coaches cost less, but depends, of course. Sometimes it costs less already for the presence of somebody who just has a coaching diploma from ICF or from wherever. In this case, we are talking about very often somebody who has a degree that is specific to understand the neurofeedback, and we are talking about a machine. So does it cost a lot?
Well, that's the other beauty about neurofeedback. You can do custom packages. So again, when I work, I never work and offer the same package to every corporation. What I will say is, let's have a meeting free of charge. Walk me through your operation. Walk me through what your objectives are. And then and this is me, I don't know how other practitioners do it, but I will create a package that's specific to that corporation or different price brackets.
Mm-hmm.
And they can choose whichever one is the most comfortable for them. I can choose for a basic one, and more expensive, more expensive, more expensive. The more expensive it gets, obviously, the more things you get. But what I do is I open options for the corporation to say, let's start here and see how it goes. Some people opt for the basic, cheaper package. Some companies go for the premium one. Everybody's different. But what I will do is I base my work based on people's needs. So I don't go in with the assumption. I need to know what the company culture is, the revenue, whatever info they're allowed to legally share with me. Then I use that information to create a package for them. It's the same thing when I work with professional golfers. Every golfer is different. I go with them and I play in the golf course with them. I do a little bit of work in the office. I need to learn how they approach the golf course, what the reactions are. And based on that, I create a package that I think will be useful for them. Athletes, corporates, housewives, students, the principle is the same. So the way I approach it is, let me give you options and let me work with what you need. I will adapt to your needs. And I think that's very important. There may be other practitioners who say, I have a set price of, let's say, $20,000 per month. That's an example. I don't know if that's the case. And that's how they sell their packages. Everybody does their own thing because we have the freedom to do it. The way I do it is, let me customize this for you. This is what I can offer you. And if we can work well, if not, then, no harm done. Some people say yes, some people say no. Some people are waiting, and that's the beauty of it.
I have a feeling, Santiago, that there is so much unexploited things that could be done with neurofeedback now that I understand it a little bit better, and especially for corporations where we need to use our brain, and we are today competing with AI. So that has added a layer of stress for people. How am I going to be useful? It has a little bit deteriorated the purpose that they had in the individual, the trust that they had on their own capabilities. We don't know how to position our creativity versus the creativity that AI is replicating. So I think that this is the time to explore options that are not outside from the traditional menu, which is coaching, training, and let's work if we have the time a little bit in the culture. No, I think it is time to try something that radically is going to change how people performs. And if you have the possibility to measure your delta, this is the investment that I did on employee A, and this is how his brain waves are doing, and this is how is the outcome of his work. My God, this is real data, so I know that I'm not being screwed in the on the topic. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Santiago, for making the time to explain. I have the impression that you have explained it to me more than to the full audience, but that's great too. Tell me, how can people can reach you out to ask you questions, to understand a little bit more about how it happens, what is the impact? How can they reach you out?
Well, I'm quite active on my Instagram, which is Neuro Santiago. Neuro Santiago is my Instagram, so people can look me up that way. I also have a YouTube channel, which is Santiago Brand, and I'm posting videos there as frequently as possible on different topics. And finally, my website, santiagobrand.com. They can write to me. There's a chat option where they can text me, and I can respond if I'm awake, depending on the time zone. So santiagobrand.com, my website, Neuro Santiago, the Instagram, and Santiago Brand, the YouTube are the best 3 ways to reach me.
I will put all these links just below this episode. Thank you very much for the wonderful conversation, Santiago.
Thank you, Ivan, for the invitation. I look forward to seeing you again.